A quiet town, a small college community, and 4 students stabbed to death in the middle of the night. No signs of forced entry, no sound, no witness. For weeks, the town of Moscow, Idaho, lived in terror. And when police finally arrested a suspect, the world was stunned. A PhD criminology student who had studied serial killers for years. This is not a movie. This is the real story of the Idaho College Murders. On November 13, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered in their off-campus home. The victims: Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Madison Mogan, 21, Xana Kernadal, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20. It was a Saturday night. The house was quiet. Most of them had been out earlier. Food trucks, parties, casual college fun. Sometime between 4 o'clock and 4:25 a.m., an intruder entered the house and stabbed them in their sleep with a large, fixed-blade knife. There were no screams. No one in the neighborhood reported hearing anything. 2 other roommates slept through the entire attack and survived. It would be 8 hours before 911 was called. Around 11:58 a.m. the next morning, a 911 call was made from a surviving roommate's phone. Police arrived to a gruesome scene, described by officers as the worst they'd ever seen. All 4 victims were found in their bedrooms, 2 on the 2nd floor, 2 on the 3rd. Each had multiple stab wounds. There were signs of struggle in some rooms, indicating the attack was fast and violent. The town of Moscow, a peaceful college town with almost no history of violent crime, was suddenly living in fear. Was a serial killer on the loose? Police faced immediate pressure from the public and the media. For weeks, no suspect was named. No murder weapon was found. No clear motive was released. The internet exploded with speculation. True crime forums, TikTok sleuths, Reddit theories, everyone had an opinion. But behind the scenes, investigators were building a case quietly, following digital breadcrumbs left behind by the killer. On December 30, 2022, nearly 7 weeks after the murders, police arrested 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger in Pennsylvania. The arrest shocked everyone. Kohberger was a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University, just 10 miles from the University of Idaho. He had studied serial killers, stalker psychology, and forensic techniques. He had even posted Reddit surveys asking criminals how they felt during their crimes. Now, he was the suspect in a quadruple homicide. The evidence against Kohberger, as detailed in the affidavit, was chilling. His white Hyundai Elantra was captured on surveillance near the victim's house, multiple times before and after the murders. Phone pings placed him in the area during the time of the killings. DNA on a knife sheath, found next to one of the bodies, matched his father's DNA through genealogical testing. Surveillance showed his car circling the block at 4 a.m., headlights off. He had allegedly returned to the scene just hours later, driving past the crime house again. This was a suspect who knew what he was doing. He studied criminal minds and thought he could outsmart everyone. Kohberger had always been fascinated by crime. In school, he was known for being quiet, intelligent, and awkward. He reportedly struggled with heroin addiction in the past, and had a reputation for being cold and socially distant. At Washington State, he was a teaching assistant for criminal justice classes. Some students complained about his harsh grading. Others noticed his demeanor suddenly changed after November 13th. He became quieter, distracted. Psychologists speculate he may have committed the murders to experience the thrill he had only studied before. He had even joined class discussions about the Idaho murders, while being the suspect all along. Kohberger waived extradition and was flown back to Idaho. He now faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. The public response has been massive. People are following every hearing, every court filing. True crime fans, survivors, and journalists have filled the courtroom with eyes. The trial is ongoing in 2025, with no clear date for a verdict. Kohberger maintains his innocence, but the evidence and the public pressure grows by the day. 4 students, 1 house, a killer with a textbook understanding of crime, but maybe not of justice. Was Bryan Kohberger acting alone? Was this planned for months? And could he have gotten away, if not for a single mistake, a sheath left behind? This is the real horror of the Idaho murders. They weren't random. They were calculated. And even today, as the trial continues, the town of Moscow still waits for closure. The first response: chaos and shock. On November 13, 2022, at approximately 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was made from a surviving roommate's phone, reporting an unconscious person. When police arrived at the off-campus residence in Moscow, Idaho, they were met with a chilling crime scene. 4 University of Idaho students had been brutally stabbed to death in their bedrooms. Officers described the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever witnessed. Initial confusion over the surviving roommates and the late 911 call created difficulties in framing the timeline of the crime. Securing the scene and early missteps. The Moscow Police Department immediately sealed off the crime scene and called in the Idaho State Police and the FBI for assistance. However, some critics argued that early crime scene control was not ideal. Foot traffic in and around the house, as well as the time delay in discovering the bodies, may have contributed to lost forensic opportunities. The murder weapon, a fixed blade knife, was missing from the scene, making it harder to track ballistic or blade evidence. Lack of immediate leads and rising public pressure. For weeks, police released minimal details about the investigation. The small town began to panic, fearing a serial killer might be loose. Law enforcement stated publicly that it was a targeted attack, but provided no clarity on who was the target or why. Their cautious approach to releasing information sparked public frustration, online conspiracy theories, and intense scrutiny from the media. The police were stuck between protecting the integrity of the case and calming a terrified community. Digital forensics and surveillance efforts. Behind the scenes, law enforcement teams were working overtime on digital evidence. Investigators pulled hours of CCTV footage from surrounding businesses, gas stations, and traffic cameras. A white Hyundai Elantra, seen multiple times near the crime scene during the early morning hours of the murders, became a crucial clue. The FBI began to assist with tracking the vehicle using license plate readers and national databases. These surveillance efforts ultimately pointed them toward a man named Bryan Kohberger. Cell tower and phone data analysis. One of the key pieces of the investigation involved cell phone tower data. Police used Kohberger's phone records to track his movements. They discovered that his phone had been in the vicinity of the victim's house multiple times before the murders, suggesting he may have been stalking or surveilling them. Most damning was the fact that Kohberger's phone was turned off during the time of the murders, and then turned back on shortly after, a move investigators saw as an attempt to avoid detection. DNA breakthrough, the knife sheath. The biggest turning point in the investigation came when police found a leather knife sheath left near the body of one of the victims. A single male DNA sample was found on the button snap of the sheath. Law enforcement used genetic genealogy to trace the DNA to Kohberger's father. This high-tech method, famously used in the Golden State Killer case, provided a solid forensic link to the suspect. The sheath, experts believe, was accidentally left behind by the killer, a crucial error that led to his arrest. Cross-state surveillance and arrest. After building their case, police tracked Bryan Kohberger as he drove across the country with his father to Pennsylvania. The FBI monitored his movements and even collected trash from his parents' home to confirm the DNA match. On December 30, 2022, a SWAT team arrested Kohberger in an early morning raid in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Police ensured that the arrest was handled with full coordination between state and federal agencies to avoid leaks or procedural errors. Building the legal case and public communication. Following the arrest, police worked closely with prosecutors to prepare an airtight case. The 19-page affidavit released after Kohberger's extradition laid out the key pieces of evidence: phone data, CCTV footage, car tracking, and DNA from the sheath. Meanwhile, police held press conferences to update the public, assuring that the community was no longer in danger. Their previously criticized silence now appeared to be a strategy to maintain the strength of their case before the arrest was made. Ongoing investigation and trial prep. As of 2025, the police continue to work with prosecutors in preparing for Kohberger's trial. They've handed over hundreds of pieces of evidence, digital records, and forensic analysis. Meanwhile, the defense has requested additional information, challenging the legality of the DNA search and the use of phone data. Police remain under pressure, as any misstep could jeopardize the high-profile prosecution. However, they are confident that the evidence is strong, and that justice for the 4 students will finally be served. Media explosion. A small town in global headlines. When news of the brutal murders broke on November 13, 2022, it instantly exploded into national and international media. Major outlets like CNN, Fox News, NBC, and the New York Times quickly deployed reporters to Moscow, Idaho. The small college town, once unknown to most Americans, was now on the front page of every major platform. Cameras surrounded the crime scene, news helicopters circled overhead, and press conferences became daily events. The shocking nature of the crime, 4 young students stabbed to death in their sleep, made it a media magnet. Sensational coverage and true crime obsession. The media's fascination quickly turned into obsession. Every detail of the victims' lives was dissected, from their Instagram photos to their DoorDash orders that night. Reporters analyzed the house layout, theorized about possible motives, and speculated about who could have committed the crime. True crime YouTubers, podcasters, and TikTok creators jumped on the case, with millions of views flooding in. However, critics accused some platforms of turning the tragedy into entertainment and spreading misinformation. The pressure on police through the media lens. The intense media spotlight put tremendous pressure on law enforcement. As weeks passed with no arrest or suspect named, public trust in the investigation began to erode. The media demanded answers, often asking tough questions during press briefings. Some anchors suggested police incompetence, while others questioned whether evidence was being mishandled. The Moscow Police Department had never handled a case of this magnitude, and the media scrutiny forced them to bring in state and federal support. The college responds: fear and lockdown atmosphere. The University of Idaho went into immediate crisis mode. Classes were suspended temporarily, and many students fled home early for Thanksgiving break. Those who remained were terrified, wondering if the killer was still among them. The school increased campus security, offered counseling services, and communicated frequently with students and parents. Administrators struggled to balance transparency with caution, knowing every statement could be picked apart by the media or fuel online speculation. Social media theories and misinformation surge. Online platforms became a war zone of theories. Reddit threads with thousands of comments proposed dozens of suspects. TikTok creators made body language analysis videos of the surviving roommates. Innocent people were falsely accused by armchair detectives. The media inadvertently amplified these falsehoods by quoting unverified internet sources. This spread of misinformation not only hurt reputations but also complicated the investigation by flooding tip lines with baseless claims. The victims' families and their media battles. The families of the victims became regular faces on national television. Kaylee Goncalves' parents, in particular, were outspoken, criticizing the police for slow communication and demanding justice through high-profile interviews. Some families hired attorneys and PR teams to manage their presence in the media. While many viewers sympathized, others felt it was inappropriate to speak so publicly during an active investigation. The divide between seeking justice and maintaining privacy became increasingly difficult to manage university's long-term impact and community healing. The University of Idaho had to address deep psychological trauma on campus. Memorials were held, scholarships were created in the victims' names, and students held candlelight vigils. Professors incorporated grief counseling into their classrooms, and student safety was prioritized across all departments. The tragedy prompted internal reviews of campus housing security and crisis response policies. The administration also made long-term investments in student mental health services. The national conversation on crime and safety. The case reignited nationwide conversations about campus safety, mental health, and the role of criminology education. The fact that the accused, Bryan Kohberger, was a criminal justice student made the story even more disturbing. Talk shows and panel discussions debated how someone so educated in criminal behavior could commit such a horrific crime, and whether universities should monitor such individuals more closely. It sparked fear and fascination in equal measure. Ongoing media trials and public fascination. Even in 2025, the Idaho murders remain a true crime phenomenon. Each new court update, each release of evidence, becomes instant breaking news. Netflix, Hulu, and HBO have all explored documentary projects. TikTok sleuths continue to chase new theories. But for the community of Moscow, this is not just a story, it's a wound that still bleeds. The media continues to play a role in shaping public opinion, influencing court coverage, and keeping the pressure alive for justice. A quiet town, a small college community, and 4 students stabbed to death in the middle of the night. No signs of forced entry. No sound. No witness. For weeks, the town of Moscow, Idaho, lived in terror. And when police finally arrested a suspect, the world was stunned. A PhD criminology student who had studied serial killers for years. This is not a movie. This is the real story of the Idaho College Murders. On November 13, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered in their off-campus home. The victims: Kaylee Goncalves, 21; Madison Mogan, 21; Xana Kernadal, 20; Ethan Chapin, 20. It was a Saturday night. The house was quiet. Most of them had been out earlier. Food trucks, parties, casual college fun. Sometime between 4 o'clock and 4:25 a.m., an intruder entered the house and stabbed them in their sleep with a large, fixed-blade knife. There were no screams. No one in the neighborhood reported hearing anything. 2 other roommates slept through the entire attack and survived. It would be 8 hours before 911 was called. Around 11:58 a.m. the next morning, a 911 call was made from a surviving roommate's phone. Police arrived to a gruesome scene, described by officers as the worst they'd ever seen. All